Hey guys, so I would just like to do this quick video to make 100% clear my political position on the channel in terms of which side I'm supporting. I honestly am not taking sides, and I don't. That's not something I honestly feel to do in my own life, and it's not something I feel to do on this channel. The responsible, adult, mature, objective thing to do on the channel is to say, hey, I'm not taking sides. That's just the way it is. I think it's quite childish to say, "Oh, the Putin's a goodie and the NATO and the West are baddies," or "NATO and the West are baddies and Putin's a goodie." What are we, like 5 years old? Come on, the world's a bit more complicated than that. Actually, this is something you'll find in life a lot. This is something, if you do a lot of work on yourself and self actualization, you get to a level of consciousness where you begin to reconcile all paradoxes. For example, collective individualism, timeless time, conscious action, unattached attachment, non identified identification, spiritual materialism, authoritarian democracy, perfect imperfection, idealistic realism. They just go on and on and on. So traditionally, oh yeah, and one of my favorites, the peaceful warrior, peaceful war. That's a Jedi, by the way. So what happens basically? Look, and just to be clear, I'm not enlightened, and I'm not saying I'm enlightened. Um, but actually, I am, and you're all inferior to me, and I need to, and I'm going to judge you. And now sign up for my course, which, by the way, costs $400 a week, and I'm banging like 20 extremely beautiful young maidens between the ages of 19 and 27 and a half from an assortment of Western countries, and I've got my pick from between about 4,000, and each week I'll just pick about 10 to have sex with, and I've got a rolling roster. And by the way, this is what a lot of spiritual. That's all sarcasm, by the way. It's me being. Obviously, I'm not doing that. Obviously, I don't think I'm superior to you, but spiritual ego, and then you know there are all these dudes out there who have some level of mystical ability, or they get some intuitive insights. Like Mooji is an example. There's lots of them out there, and they're charlatans. And then they get endless numbers of young people coming through, and a lot are extremely beautiful young Western women and spiritual seekers, and they just manipulate them, and then they sexually abuse them. It's horrific. And then oh yeah, and then they abuse the fact that they get a few spiritual insights to make everyone think that they're a freaking saint, and then they abuse their staff and treat people like crap and steal their money. This is quite common. You have to be careful. The Bible warns about this. There'll be I'll find the quote and put it in the description box below, but it's something like, beware of false prophets, for they appear outwardly as sheep, but inwardly they're ravenous wolves. Well, there's tons of them around because we're in the end times right now from a biblical perspective. But there's good ones too. Like there's still some really good ones. I think Eckhart Tolle is one of my personal favorite examples of a good one. He's just he's not people like he hasn't been doing abuse like a lot of these other spiritual teachers and gurus, and he's just humble. He's just very relaxed, and he's also quite funny, which is a good sign with spiritual teachers that they don't take themselves seriously, and they're often quite funny, and he's quite funny. But one I have done a lot of work on myself. Uh, yeah, in recent years, I started working on myself in terms of personal development, psychology, spirituality, and philosophy back in 2010 when I had a spiritual awakening in the cloud forest beneath Machu Picchu. I wasn't on drugs, and I started seeing auras around plants, and I could hear this enormous forest spirit. It was the size of a horse, and it was moving through the forest canopy parallel to me, about 20 meters off to my right, about 15 meters up in the canopy. So it's 60 feet off to my right, 45 meters off the ground. This thing followed me for about 3 kilometers, and it was with five other New Zealanders, friends, and one of them could sense it. us being watched, but he didn't know what it was. One of them could kind of feel something, but he was afraid of it. I could sense it. I could feel us being watched, but I could also hear it. But I could sense and feel it wasn't malevolent. It was positive. It was just sort of keeping an eye on us. But I think I could hear it because of my spiritual connection to nature. So that completely blew my mind. I was doing a science degree at the time, and I had no idea that. Yeah, I mean, I had an experience similar to what people have on psychedelics and these drugs, except I wasn't on any. I was just at a sacred site. So Machu Picchu is one of these vortex places like Sedona or the Northern Rivers region in New South Wales, or Azrock Uluru is another one. Lake Atitlan in Guatemala is another one. Vilcabamba in Ecuador is another one. LIONPAID in Ecuador is one. There are these places all over the world. I think like Wanaka in New Zealand, there are some vortexes under the lake. I don't quite know how to explain it, but there are some places around the world where there's very strong spiritual energy, and they draw all kinds of. They tend to draw a whole bunch of extremely rich people, tons of hippies, and then lots of alternative, free-thinking, kind of independent weirdos. Mostly good weirdos, like the kind of Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein weirdos, but sometimes a few serial killer weirdos, the bad ones too. Like I experienced that in Byron Bay. It's mostly good weirdos, but I almost got taken out by some of the serial killer ones, and they brutally murdered another guy 5 months later after I tried to warn the cops about it, and they ignored my report. I've got videos about that on my channel. Theo Hayes, poor guy. Anyway, so I started doing work on myself, and yeah, around 2010. And after I had that spiritual awakening, interestingly, I started consciously doing work on myself. I consciously decided, right, I have all these blind spots. I'm not mature enough. I don't have enough wisdom. I'm a bit immoral. I've got some, sin basically. I wouldn't have called it that back then because I hadn't moved into this kind of Christian. I hadn't moved into this Christian chapter of my spirituality, but I did. So I'm quite proud of myself because I knew that I have this big mission in my life in terms of my role in conservation, and I'm not going to talk about the details here, but it's big, big, and I've known that's my purpose since I was 17 years old. I mean, clearly, I'm 37 now. I had a rough idea since I was 11 years old, in 1998, late 90s. But yeah, I began consciously working on myself, doing shadow work and things like this, and just be trying to become a better person, and like breaking bad habits and beginning new habits so that I could be ready for my career in conservation. Interestingly, like I did end up getting a lot of trauma as a result of that because it brought me into contact. When I began to heal my own trauma, I then began to see the trauma and like not just evil and darkness of my wider family, which I hadn't seen previously, and then my society. So actually, my decision to evolve and heal, but mostly evolve, my decision to evolve brought me into direct conflict with a toxic family and a mostly toxic society, which is New Zealand. That then created a whole bunch of trauma. I then also had to go and way and heal that, which then became part of the spiritual development process. So I've been on this path for about 14 years. And yeah, you reach this point where at a certain level you start to reconcile these opposites, and yeah, ultimately, another one I call them double threads. That's my working name for them. But the way it works, say for example, with collective individualism, so ultimately the collective is more important, but the bigger part plays the bigger role. So in our day-to-day reality is that we need to meet our own needs. Or another example is selfishness. So the ultimate reality is it's most important to help others. But in order to do that, we first have to be, and it's selfish in a healthy way, in the sense that we need to meet our own needs first in order that we can be happy and healthy and thriving so that we can help others. Because if you put other people's needs before your own, which might sound noble, it's actually counterproductive because you end up getting sick and unhappy, and then you burn out, and then you can't help anyone, and then people actually need to help you. Or timeless time. So we're actually ultimately we should be living in the now. We should be mostly living in the present moment, and that's the most important thing. But for the day-to-day realities, we do need to work with time. So in reality, we're actually working with time a lot, even though ultimately the most important thing is to be in the present moment. And so like yeah, another one of these is simple complexity. So actually, it's funny because life is all of these things at the same time, but ultimately it's the first one. That's how it works. So like the greater part plays the greater role. Another example is humble pride. You should be humble, but you should also be proud enough to have self-respect. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of like, your family ancestry and like what you're doing and all that. Like that's healthy pride, but within the context, imagine like a small circle within a much bigger circle, which is humility. Like you need both, but you just have to get the order right. Okay, so one of the big you can learn a lot from these what I call double threads. It's probably something I need to write about further more in the future. I've got a long list of them, but I'm giving all this lead up to explain this particular one. So simple complexity. Okay, so ultimately, so the world is extremely complex. It's infinitely complex. But the ultimate truth is that actually life is incredibly simple. Life is very, very simple. I typically find that whenever someone's trying to bullshit you, they'll say, "Oh, it's not complicated." Like there's a meme I saw, and this could apply equally to men as well as to women, because actually, just to clarify, I'm not having a go at women, and I'm not saying it in a derogatory way. So first of all, I want to clarify before I make this joke. I don't think people who are promiscuous should be shamed because that's judgmental, like that's judgmental, unloving behavior. It should be disincentivized because it's very toxic and it's destructive to the individual and society. But first of all, I'm not shaming promiscuity, and second of all, I'm not targeting women because promiscuity is equally as unhealthy in men as it is in women, and neither should be doing it. But there was this meme I saw online once, and there were two girls, and one saying something to another, and she was saying, one girl saying to the other, "Oh, my relationship with blah 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 is complicated," and the other one says, "Quantum physics is complicated. You're just a slut." And I actually had a dream where the Holy Spirit jokingly told me, "Don't be a slut." But I was shown men and women. She was talking about men and women respectively. I was given kind of different maximum numbers beyond which you shouldn't sleep with this so many more people roughly in your lifetime. Beyond that, it gets dangerous, unhealthy. The numbers were slightly different for men and women, interestingly, but they were by modern Anglo-Saxon standards very very low. It was yeah, but I'll do another video about that's actually an important message. But yeah, like I find I had this Russian friend years ago. Like, yeah, like again, this is why I feel a bit ambivalent about the war. Like, dude, my best friend in this lifetime so far, we were like brothers. It was such a beautiful friendship. It was like Red and Andy from the Shawshank Redemption. We both helped each other escape from hell. And he was such a beautiful soul. And he's Russian. I mean, he's still around. He didn't die. It's just his body died. He's still. I've had a few dreams about him. He's doing well. He's happy in the spirit world, in heaven, and which is where he is because he's a beautiful human. But yeah, Alexander, Sasha, as he called him. I mean, yeah, my best friend, bro, dude he grew up in Moscow, and he was amazing. He was such a good human. It's like, I quite like Russia. I get on quite well with most Russians. I quite like their culture. Uh, I find the women stunning. I find them have a funny sense of humor. I like their honesty. They're not perfect, just like any group. Of course, every group, collective consciousness, group soul, just like every individual consciousness, person has their good sides and bad sides until they do the work on themselves and integrate their shadow. At which point there isn't light and dark. There's just light because they've transmuted and integrated their dark side. So it's either been wiped out or they've just removed those habits and kind of aspects of their psyche, or they have transformed them from bad things into good things. So in the future, yeah, I mean, humanity is now in the process of slowly, collectively moving towards enlightenment. But on this planet, this is part of the reason for all these upheavals. But my friend Sasha, yeah, yeah, that's one of the things he taught me. He taught me a lot. I taught him a lot too. We helped each other a lot. It was kind of, it was reciprocal. He sadly died in a freak accident midway through last decade. I think he was only 27, and it's really sad. But whatever, c'est la vie. He's fine. He's doing well. He's happy now. He's still around. I miss him though. Anyway, damn, why did you have to go? Anyway, he said to me, people, yeah, I think he said they have a saying, and it might have been like a proverb in Russian, but he was talking to me in English. He spoke fluent English, and I think it might have been. If it wasn't, it was just something he'd come up with. But I think it was a saying in Russian. He said, yeah, but in any case, it was. He said this thing he said was that, the truth, the lies tend to be extremely long. People will talk a lot and very complicated, but the truth is always like very short and it's extremely simple. Like you get this with relationships. People will go like blah blah blah. Well, blah blah blah. It's like, well, yeah, like I'm not attracted to you anymore. Like that's it. And ultimately this relationship's going to collapse because I'm leaving, or you might really have feelings for someone and you don't know what to say, but it's like, well, blah 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 blah. I think you're. It's like, yeah, I'm in love with you, or or maybe you're not. Maybe you're deluded, um, and you think that person is someone they're not, and an angel, but they actually turn out to be a demon. That happened to me when I messed up my dream interpretation. So be careful out there, friends, because yeah, dream interpretation is it can be a tricky world. There was a whole drama with some NZ chick, Kiwi chick, who was not what she appeared to be. Yeah, but like yeah. So ultimately, look, life is both extremely complex and very simple. But the greater truth, it's very simple. And I think it's important to remember that with World War III, it can get really, really complicated for all the political stuff. Um, how would I summarize that in terms of all the complexity? I mean, it's like, oh, is Putin and good, and is the West bad, or is the West good and Putin bad? And then it's like, you know, there's all these alliances and all these different factions, and it gets really, really complicated around the Caucasus and the like, the Middle East. It gets ridiculously complicated there. The web of alliances and they're all changing, and you get lost in it. And then is Putin's Christian, but he's also kind of a psychopath. And then like our leadership in the West absolutely sucks. And we've got Biden, who really should be in an old folks home in an with getting proper care for his dementia. And then we're Babylon, but at the same time, like a lot of at our heart, and I've been shown this by dreams by God, actually most people in the Anglo-Saxon countries are still good. We're fundamentally good, all of them, including New Zealand, which is the worst of the lot. New Zealand, Australia, Canada, UK, US, been shown by God, yeah, the fundamental core of all of these countries, the people are naturally good. They're just extremely corrupted. So it's like endlessly complicated, and you're trying to work all this out in your head. And then, yeah, and Russia is doing all these war crimes, but they're a Christian country. And actually, yeah, I would say that overall, the people are definitely less degenerate and toxic and they're more Christian in terms of the way they're living than most people in Anglo-Saxon countries right now. Like straight up, you can't. That's not up for debate. And they just you don't understand how much like Sodom and Gomorrah countries like the US and New Zealand have become until you go to countries like Ecuador where Christianity is still strong. It's just like porn is everywhere. It's hypersexualized beyond belief. People are so selfish and narcissistic. Yeah, that's global, but it's less in countries that are still strongly Christian. And I'm sorry if you don't like that, then it's just deal with it because it's the truth. Um, so you got these contradictions, right? And it's endlessly complicated. Seems endlessly complicated, and it is in a way. But ultimately, I think it's very simple. If I had to sum up the truth of World War Three, I think just and simplify it down to its essence, I would say that all sides are at fault. There's that quote in the Bible: "Let who is without sin cast the first stone." When Jesus was talking to a group of people who are throwing stones to stone a woman who'd been accused of adultery, it's like, don't be a hypocrite. No one's perfect. Russia's not perfect. The West is not perfect. If I had to summarize it, I would say, yeah, I've talked about this in the past. I feel differently about most of Europe, although Europe's not great morally and spiritually right now. We've definitely fallen really far. But the Anglo-Zionist countries in Israel are just absolute Sodom and Gomorrah, Babylon. So we're not great. Russia's not great. Russia is less not great than we are. They're the lesser of two evils in terms of spiritual degradation and sin on balance in the total of their population. And it's not to say, of course, there's lots of really, really bad things about Russia, because there are. Like, Putin's kind of has the psychopathic element. He's also really charming, and, like, that again, complexity, contradictions. Um, and Russians can be extremely, ridiculously, insanely brutal in war and do horrific war crimes, and those have been committed in Ukraine. But the West is kind of. I was talking to a friend last night, an American friend from New York, and he basically summarized it. He said, "Yeah, it's like Washington D.C. and Wall Street are in a suicide pact, and they're committed to, And then he said, "It's there's this bear, and we're like, it's so funny. This guy's in his late 40s, and the way he jokes, it's just like he just makes you laugh like a kid." Um, we're just poking it. It's like, hey, hey, come on, poke. Hey, ha, 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 hey, hey, come on, poke. Hey, ha, 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 poke. Like this stupid, arrogant bully, little 6-year old. Sooner or later, the bear is going to get pissed off and, take a swat and, like, claw us badly, and then he hit me, teacher, he hit me. It's like, dude, you started this. That's a pretty good summary of the way things are going geopolitically. Yeah, and Washington and DC are in a suicide pact, and they're committed to taking this path, which is going to destroy us. Like, our countries are going to be completely destroyed. We're going to need to rebuild Western civilization after this. But it's coming from London, Tel Aviv, and DC. I would say Tel Aviv's the worst, London's second worst, DC after that. Those three countries. And Australia, Canada, and New Zealand just go along with them. But the Russian elites, they certain among lots among them have an interest in pulling us into this. And at a certain level, at a certain level, there's definitely very high up a level of global coordination between elites of all countries to make sure this war happens. There's a transnational element where they just want depopulation. So that thing is there too. But yeah, I would say, just to reiterate, just to simplify all the complexity, no one's perfect. Everyone's got some dirt on them. Yeah, as Jesus said, let he who's without sin cast the first stone. So, like, who are we to judge? Like, as countries, everyone's got stuff on them. But the ones who are driving us into this are the Western elites. Although, yeah, like, as I said, it's probably to an extent being organized so it happens between the Russian elites and the Western elites at some high level. But, like, regardless of that, yeah, the simple truth is we're driving us into this. You've got Putin there, as my friend said, sitting, like, calm, very calm and sober, saying, "Look, you got to stop. You got to stop. We're going to hit you. We're going to hit you." And then, ha, 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 ha. We keep poking the bear. As my friend said, life life doesn't teach you lessons. Life gives you the opportunity to learn lessons. Whether you learn those lessons is up to you. Or as the Americans say, put more simply, fuck around, find out. So the West is fucking around, and excuse the French, the bad language. I do make a conscious effort to use swear words as seldom as possible on this channel. I will for emphasis at certain points, but and my friend's the same. I don't swear, and that's important. But every now and then, yeah, low vibrational language, right? But when the shoe fits, yeah, fuck around, find out. We fucked around. We're about to find out. And so yeah, the Anglo-Zionist Empire, we're just gonna end up. It's like suicide by cop, basically. Yeah, or a suicide pact, as my friend said. Yeah, in Western civilization, and most of all the Anglo-Saxon countries are just going to end up in a pile of rubble. Like our civilizations are going to be mostly destroyed, but that doesn't mean we can't rebuild them, which we will. And then we'll get our karma, and then Russia and these other countries, which will go way too far. I mean, Russia's Christian; they have a lot of good. There's a lot of good to say about that. Them, you can't say that about frickin' North Korea or China, where they're just openly anti-God and kind of satanic. At least, I mean, Russia's got a lot of Satanism and like, you know, witchcraft, but at least there's strong Christianity there as well. You can't say that about China and North Korea. But in any case, all these Axis countries, they will give us our karma, and then we will give them their karma. And then this war is gonna wipe the slate karmically in terms of debts from past bad things countries have done all over the world. All the countries are going to take turns wiping each other's debt spiritually, not just financially, which will also happen in the economic collapses beforehand. So it's like the great spiritual reset before we enter this positive new golden age, which we'll be moving into by the 2050s. So that's the kind of 35,000 foot view of it. It's not ultimately that complicated. Ultimately, it's pretty simple, although at the same time, it's very, very complex. But the greater truth is that it's very simple. So I think if you can keep that in mind, you can understand that. And yeah, because I see the issues on both sides, and also because I take more of a planetary perspective on what's happening on Earth, I don't really want to get involved because I don't want to, like I've said in the past, well, I wouldn't rule out getting involved to fight for Spain and Europe. I wouldn't ever even consider fighting for New Zealand. Like, you're not. What am I fighting for? Like a pub and a brothel and a bunch of drunk and a bunch of corrupt politicians of the psychological age of 15. It's like this country isn't worth defending. There's very little worth left worth defending here in New Zealand. I'm not going to pay for a government that doesn't give an. I'm not going to fight for a government that doesn't give an F about me, and that's completely incompetent and corrupt. Just no. Or Spain is still a lot. Spain's fallen quite a bit too, but you can't compare Spain to New Zealand. There's still a lot worth fighting for in Spain. Personally, I'd consider fighting for Spain, but my preference is to stay out of it. I don't really want to. I don't want to. It's not so. I'm not. I wouldn't mind. I don't really care so much about being killed, honestly. But I would. It's more that I'd prefer not to be involved killing anyone. But maybe God has something planned for me. I don't know. At this stage, in terms of what God's directing me to do, I'm just trying to stay out of it and focus on my mission and conservation. I'm not really. Yeah, I'm not in the military. My mission in life is about saving and protecting the world's biodiversity. It's different. So, for you guys, yeah, I just advise you that that's my main tip here. If it starts to get confusing and overwhelming, just remember, yeah, yes, life is infinitely complex, but the ultimate truth is that it's very, very simple. So if you start getting confused and it starts seeming too complicated, just remember it's pretty simple. And so is this war. I mean, to sum up, I think I've said it twice already, but these points can bear repetition because it helps to drum it in so that you'll remember it. 1, no one's perfect. 2, ultimately, at the same time, the lesser of two evils spiritually is Russia at this point, but Russia's still not doesn't mean they're perfect. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say there's a good guy and a bad guy in this war. I think it's a quite a respectfully it's an immature kind of childish way of looking at it. It's not like when you get older, you see life's not that simple. Like no side is completely good and no side is completely bad. It's a mix on both. Yes, at this stage, on balance, overall, Russia, not compared to most of Europe, because I think a lot of European countries are definitely much way ahead of Russia spiritually and culturally, politically, not culturally, spiritually and politically. But yes, compared to the US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Israel, definitely Russia is the lesser of two evils. And that's why they've got a level of kind of protection, and that's why they're going to have better technology, and that's why they're going to kick our ass. And the poor frickin' Europeans aren't going to have any choice for the most part. They're going to be dragged into it. Not all of them, but most of them don't want to even be involved, I think, but they have no choice because they're vassal states under NATO of the United States, which is controlled by Israel through, videotapes of American politicians doing illegal things with underage girls and boys. That's what the whole Epstein tapes things was about. He was a Mossad agent. And England's freaking dark. I definitely get better energy from the US than England. Um, so yeah, London, Tel Aviv, and DC are driving this thing. Yeah. So one, well, it's like, yeah, there are no goodies or baddies. Ultimately, it's more complicated than that. Two, at the same time, if you had to pick a side that's in terms of who's dragging and leading us into this war, right now you can see it's either Russia it's the West. In reality, it's yeah, London, Tel Aviv, and DC, Israel, UK, and the US in that order, from worst to least, are pulling us into this war. And we're not as bad as Russia, but Russia still has tons of issues, just like we do. And thirdly, from a higher perspective, this is just an all kind of a natural process to an extent of the energies balancing themselves as countries give each other their karma to wipe the slate clean, so we can kind of have a clean slate before we move into this golden age. I think that's kind of how I would sum it up. And then what you do and what your path in this is I can't tell you that. That's what the abusive guru would tell you to. If you're a guy, he'd give you some information, get lots of money, and then tell you to go away. And if you're an attractive young woman, he'd give you lots of information, then he'd groom you, and then he'd SA you, sexually assault slash rape you, and then he'd kick you out, and he'd get his new chick in, so he can. This is what they do. Um, but we're leaving the age of the guru. No, no more teachers, no more humans. That's an insight I had recently. I mean, really, we should just be going directly to God. Ideally, you should develop that ability yourself, even if you don't have that mystic ability. I mean, only you know your path. Okay, no one else knows it, and no one else can, because no one else can feel and know what you know and know yourself. So only you know what your role in all this will be. But yeah, I hope that kind of helps to give you some clarity on the overall situation. And this explains why I'm taking a neutral stance on the channel. I will say I'm the same as Jan de Villiers. I like the white Christian South African group, white Christian conservative South African group. I like the black South African Christian group too. I mean, I had some really close black South African Christian friends, and they're amazing. I mean, I like them too. I guess I'm just obviously more culturally aligned with the South African Christians of European descent. I really like the Christian conservatives from the US, from the South and the Midwest, and I like the Russian Christians. Yeah, I like all those three groups because they've still got strong good values and morals, which have just gone out. It's gone to hell in the Anglo-Saxon countries in recent years. And again, complexity that you'll like a lot of Americans from that Christian conservative group, they naturally feel they like Putin more than their own government because, of course, because Putin's more Christian and sober-minded, whereas they've got Biden in there right now, who's completely antichrist spirit and drunk. So imagine how confused some Americans must be feeling. They're going to be in a position where they're kind of feeling almost like they support Russia more than they do their own government, even when Russians are killing Americans. So don't let it mess up your head. Just remember those 3 points I made. If it all starts to get too much, and then just remember what your path in it is. You can theorize and intellectualize about the stuff as much as you want. At the end of the day, like, you have to ask yourself what's actionable. For- yeah, a breakaway branch of human civilization might have gone off and with reverse engineered, shot down alien UFO type craft that are powered by anti gravity. That are powered by free energy devices and use electrogravitics, which is anti gravity technology for propulsion. And for all we know, that breakaway branch of humanity on Earth has colonized 20 planets within 100 light years of Earth by this point. But at the end of the day, yeah, that's all nice. But how relevant is it? I mean, it might as well be science fiction. Like, this has no impact on your life. So, you can intellectualize and theorize about it all you want, but yeah, at the end of the day, just what's your role in it? How can I be happy and healthy and live a good life? Just focus on that. So I hope that clarifies my position on why I'm politically neutral and gives some clarity to the conflict and what's coming. And yeah, thanks for your time. All the best. Cheers.